Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Perkovich, and this is episode number 577. Releasing December 7 in Australian cinemas is Time Addicts, a sci-fi thriller that tells the story of two codependent drug addicts who go on a trip of a lifetime when they ingest a drug that teleports them through time. An innovative, entertaining, and surprisingly touching addition to the time travel movie subgenre, Time Addicts also marks the impressive feature film debut of director and writer Sam Ogden. I'm glad to say joins me now on the podcast. Sam, how are you?
Great, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Look, before we begin, I got a question to ask, something I picked up when I was watching the movie. So there's a scene in the film where Denise, the character played by Freya Tingley, she has to take a bag out of this guy's arm and she replaces it with a teddy bear. Now, there's some mannerisms and some things that happen there during this scene. Number one, she kind of goes like this with her hands. She kind of like gets her hands ready. She does the whole thing. And then afterwards, a little bit of dust falls from the ceiling. And I'm thinking to myself, Sam, is this your nod to Raiders of the Lost Ark in any way?
It wasn't actually, but I think just like those little moments of building anticipation and we're obviously working on like pretty tight budget, so just trying to be creative in terms of how we showed movement and how we showed gave the house like physicality and kind of gave the house life. And that little wrist flex from Freya was all her, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of guys in action scenes when they kind of like pump their biceps getting ready to fight, which I thought was a nice little nod to Denise's skills at pickpocketing.
Very good. I wanted to talk about how this is just such a unique movie in the time travel kind of like movie subgenre, because there's been so many time travel films and sometimes you get some sent to you and it's kind of like the same old, same old. In this case, what makes it really unique to me is that time travel devices, it's like an external thing, a phone booth, a car, what have you. This is like the kind of like the thing that makes the time travel happen in your movie, in Time Addicts, is a drug. You ingest it, you inhale it. Where did that kind of idea come from, to have something that ingests and takes part internally the body, as opposed to having like an external kind of object to be the thing that makes people go back and forth in time?
Yeah, I guess it kind of I can't really remember where it first came from, but I always liked the idea that it felt very visceral. Like it felt very like the characters are getting more and more stretched in terms of their capacity, and the more of the drug they ingest, the more sort of lost they get. So obviously there's like a lot of parallels you can pull there. But yeah, I like the fact that you kind of had all these inbuilt story mechanics where it was just putting more and more pressure on the characters, but they couldn't stop.
Was there any influence whatsoever from, well, look, like several months ago, I was listening to a podcast about how the military, both in the US and the UK, were messing around with like psychedelics and mind-altering drugs and LSD and trying to weaponize it, right, for like some type of Cold War, espionage kind of stuff. Was any kind of that in influence in using like a external kind of like psychedelic kind of drug kind of thing in your movie?
I guess I was just sort of thinking through, okay, well, where would this come from? The time period, like we find out in the film that the drug initially comes from, it was manufactured initially in the year 2050. So thinking through like the evolution of drugs, and obviously taking a little bit of creative liberty, but just sort of thinking through, okay, well, like we've already got some pretty heavy psychedelics and psychotropics now. Where could it go, and what would something be in the year 2050 or 2053 that would be sort of considered a street drug that can kind of even be like palmed off as like a little bit pedestrian for people of that time.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. The subject of drug abuse in the movie in relation to time travel is interesting because I've known some people, I've known some family who had problems with that kind of stuff, and it's interesting how drug addiction in one person, it can have a ripple effect on everyone kind of around them, from close family members to even like just like the broader community. Was that something that kind of was brought to mind as well? How altering something in time can have a ripple effect, like that whole butterfly effect, but how drug addiction within a family or community can have that same type of ripple effect as well. It can change things usually for the worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, I think like, there are a lot of parallels drawn in the film from, like those kind of aspects. I think, also that the way the characters interact with their past and future selves sort of speaks a little bit to that as well. Like you're never really, I guess when you sort of get that deep into abuse of drugs, you kind of never really doing yourself any favors, and you are sort of setting up your future self for more issues, and so kind of playing with that idea of like kind of screwing yourself over at the same time.
Um, I described the movie as a sci-fi thriller. There's a lot of kind of black comedy kind of elements to it as well, and I think a lot of it comes especially from the character of Johnny, who Charles Grounds just does a great job in performing and creating. One of my favorite quotes in the movie is how Johnny described himself as a man who I think he was described himself to someone else, and he says, this guy has none of my spirited charm or ambition, which is kind of such a funny thing, and it suits the character to a T because his ego is just as big as his addiction, right? Getting that balancing act though, of getting an actor who can hit that balancing act between the kind of like the funny side of the character, but also kind of like the sympathetic side as well, and then kind of like having that skeezy through line between both of them. That's a high wire act, I think, because that can go either way and can really kind of tip the balance of the movie one way to another. Charles does a great job in doing that. What was it like casting him in the movie, and was that part kind of difficult to cast considering that balancing act that character needed?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult to cast, and we spent so long looking for Johnny that we didn't leave ourselves much time to find Denise, which was really stressful. I'd say the casting was probably the most stressful part of the whole process. So like we were super grateful when we found Charles. Like I think we kind of all knew straight away that he walked the line between all those things. He could be sort of like he could sort of bring it down and be a bit skeezy, and you knew that he always had kind of his own narratives going on and his own sort of like little manipulations and so forth, but he was still charming and likable, and he's probably someone that everyone kind of knows, and you kind of brush off as talking a fair bit of shit and philosophizing on a lot of stuff that he probably doesn't know a lot about, but he still is, somewhat intelligent in his own way. And we struck gold with Charles. I think like absolutely is like a high wire act, and that's why we kind of spent so long looking for Johnny, because we knew that if we got that part wrong, like we kind of probably thought that the film would be a bit of a joke in a bad way. So very lucky like with his performance, and then having left ourselves only sort of like a couple of weeks to find Denise, we got super lucky with Freya as well.
Well, Freya is the character of Denise is very much the heart of the film, right? She's kind of like the emotional core of it, and Freya just does an excellent job in it. To have someone coming like so late in the process, there, it was like 2 weeks before pre-production, right? When you finally get her in and you bring her and Charles together, what was that like finally seeing your Denise and your Johnny, your two kind of characters together in one room at the same time, considering the hard circumstances of trying to cast those two characters?
Yeah, well, Freya just moved back from LA, so she was in Perth. She's originally from there, and so we'd initially done a first round of auditions for Denise, and we still wanted to see some more people, and got lucky that Freya had just arrived back, and she sent us a tape that we all really liked, and we sent her another scene to just to sort of see how she bounced off Charles. Like it was something we were just going to do over Zoom. And we'd sort of said, can we kind of do this like, in a few days' time? Like we're on a bit of a tight schedule. And she was like, I can just do it today. And she just learned the whole scene that day. And like, just it was incredibly difficult and long scene as well. So we were like, it was like we kind of knew that she was going to be on it. I mean, it's a really difficult part, and I mean, she's in most scenes, and then sometimes she's twice in the scene as well. So she has a lot to carry. And we got super lucky with her and just sort of what she brought to the role as well.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. this movie is Melbourne shot, Melbourne set, but the main setting is this house. And from what I've read, like this house is like something that's going to be set for demolition. So you and your art team can go in there and mess around with it and do what you need to do with it. And what I love about having the main setting as a house is that to me, a lived-in house is kind of like a time capsule. Like every room has its own memories. I remember not long ago, I took my kids to the house that I grew up in. And it just seemed like that every time I stepped into a room, there was like all the memories going to come alive and like right in front of you. You know, every room has a certain scenario or something happened here or something happened there. You can almost kind of like, is kind of like jumping back in time and seeing it. Is that how you kind of wanted to approach the house in your movie? Like you wanted to see it as kind of like a time capsule where every room kind of captures an essence of time or a moment in time? Because the great thing about the movie as well is the sound of design in the movie is that while two characters are speaking in one room, and you could hear in the background the other rooms have their own kind of like things going on as well, right? And especially with headphones on, I think it works like really brilliantly. I love to see what it's like in a cinema setting as well. So the whole kind of time capture element of the house, is that something that you really like wanted to kind of like hone in on and in kind of like bring forth on the screen?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, there's a lot of little Easter eggs in there for people that can be, you know, bothered to sort of go through with a fine-tooth comb in the background. You know, like we kind of kept a lot of elements in the house that kind of grow throughout. And obviously there are some key story moments that, you know, we sort of see things in the house, you know, like for instance, like, you know, some writings or some etchings and you know, the mirror and so forth, where you know, you're kind of getting in the house at the present, and then you know things are a certain way, and you're kind of asking yourself, well, how did we get here? How did it get to this? And you know, so we sort of like unpack that as the story goes along. I think also we sort of like you know, as well as the house being, you know, kind of a little time capsule, like we also thought of it as its own character as well, given that we sort of have such a limited cast, like trying to pull from the cast and different aspects in terms of building the story with more characters. It's like, okay, well, we can use different aspects or different versions of the characters themselves to be sort of different characters, but then the house as well as a character. And you know, like when they first get in there, it does feel, you know, a little bit haunted until we sort of figure out what's going on. And then obviously you know, there's even, we get to the point where the house even speaks, you know, so like it definitely was its own sort of character, and you know, had probably gone through a lot of its own sort of like, I guess, traumas that the characters had too.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Another theory I had while watching your movie. So when reading about your influences for the film, I read like Scanner Darkly was something that was big on you. The films of Terry Gilliam was something that was big on you, especially something like 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys was released in 1995. A key year in the movie is 1995. Is that choice of 1995 kind of like a little tribute to that movie?
I wasn't, but yeah, I did see that recently, and I was like, oh, that's a nice little serendipitous nod to 12 Monkeys. But yeah, that film had like a huge influence, and yeah, I loved you know, Terry Gilliam films growing up. So like yeah, any sort of little nod to some of those classics, you know, yeah, happy that we got that in there.
So my next question, and just for my audience, is going to come with a little bit of a mature warning here, because we're going to talk about some words here that show up in a screenplay quite often. I was talking to another director recently, and she had to move the word "cunt" in her movie quite a bit as well. And I always find it funny how, and it's a joke I used to have with an old friend of mine, is that only in Australia could that word be used as like a term of affection, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying how when she screened her movie to American audiences, they couldn't just really kind of get into it because that word over there is just a little,
Yeah,
still a bit taboo. Where in Australia, it's something like, I don't know, it's almost become like Aussie lingo in a sort of way. And the creative way that you use that word and other curse words in your screenplay as well, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of like almost like a Mamet, David Mamet kind of thing. It kind of like pops. It's kind of like a rhythm to it. When you write your dialogue and you put your curse words in there, whether it be the word fuck or cunt or what have you, are you aware of a rhythm that you're setting with your words? Is that something how you like to write? Because it's something that I kind of picked up on, especially when Johnny has a dialogue, because I find that there's a little bit of a way that he approaches his the way that he speaks.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny is Johnny. I guess he's sort of like a modern day poet, right? So like I kind of did think a lot, in terms of, I think even without the swearing, even like his sort of regular speech patterns, like when he's sort of just giving his little speech at the start of the film in the Dumpling House about undercover cops and legacy, like that just sort of flows so well the way Charles delivers it too. And I think yeah, with the swearing, I guess like when I was writing it, I felt like I hadn't gone overboard with the swearing. I mean, like you see a lot of lads and essays around, and like cunt and fuck would be in pretty much every
Yeah,
every sentence that they would
yeah.
say. So like at times I did feel like I was being like conservative with it. And I probably had a lot less swearing in there than in the final film. I think that the swear words were just, the characters just kind of lent into them, or the actors just lent into them. And I think that that's fair enough because like I guess they're always just trying to look for that little bit of edge, and like it does sort of roll off the tongue so well, and give a lot of those little more venomous insults a bit more bite. So like I think that I think in the screenplay, like I kind of used it where I felt was relevant, but I know that like there were a fair few more thrown in on the day.
There's another line in the movie that I'm a big fan of, and I think it really brings home certain things in the movie. And I had it written down here, and it says, where is it here? Ba, 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 ba. Oh, okay, here we go. We all owe our past just one more chance. And I think that's a really great line of dialogue in the movie, because I think when people see, people like Denise or Johnny, whether it be in your movie or in real life, people come with certain preconceptions, maybe like their own kind of attitudes towards kind of like people in addiction and such. And I think it's a really nice line, because it's a reminder that a lot of times when people are in the throes of addiction, especially when people are in recovery, you realize that when they strip everything back, and that's kind of like a whole point of recovery, right? You have to strip everything back and build yourself from the bottom up. There's the past, there's trauma, there's all these other things. I think it's a really nice line that you put in there. So I think it was a good on you for really reminding us in that movie that everyone has a past, and everyone has falls once in a while, and sometimes people just can't get up. And I think Johnny and Denise, it was just something that happened to them.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, we worked really hard on just that sort of the growth of the characters, and hopefully people kind of pick up on that and feel for them. So like I know that initially, like we did a focus group screening, I think when we finished our first rough cut, and a lot of people were like, oh, I don't really like them at the start of the film, and I just don't see that as an issue. Like I think that that's a positive. If you don't like them and you kind of grow to like them over the period of the film, then hopefully we've done our jobs in that sense as well. And yeah, totally. Like I think I think there are definitely people, and some of the older people that were in our focus group as well, that maybe couldn't get past that, or couldn't accept that these guys had sort of gone through something. And in Johnny and Denise's case, and this isn't the case with everyone, but I think there are their addictions and their codependency is symptomatic of like larger issues, which we sort of unpack throughout the film as well. So I hope that everyone can kind of understand that, because I know that everyone does have issues and has different ways of dealing with them.
Well, I got to say that Time Addicts has come to me in a really great time, because I'm actually putting together my favorite film, Aussie films of the year, and it's firmly in there. And for everyone out there listening, December 7th, which is tomorrow, go check out Time Addicts and watch it in the cinema. Everyone needs to watch Aussie films in the cinema, independent films especially. Time Addicts, just like how Johnny said, this is a movie of spirit, the charm, and ambition. And I'd like to thank Sam for your time today. Congratulations, mate, with your movie. Can't wait to see what you do next. I know this was a rough shoot just right after COVID, and indie production and everything. And you show just really great promise here, man. And I can't wait to see what you do in the future. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. That's really kind. And yeah, no, appreciate it.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.